What is going on, everybody? We have made it to one of my favorite times of the year, draft grades season, baby. I'm especially excited for all of those incoming comments telling me just how useless draft grades are. Look, I know one thing. I didn't spend the last 4 months grinding college tape to not tell you guys how I think every team found value in this weekend's NFL draft, and how I see all of these players fitting in with their new teams. Today, I'm going to be giving you my thoughts on every single pick from the AFC West, including any undrafted free agent steals that stood out to me as well. Before we do get started though, guys, if you could do me a huge favor, take just a second to hit that like button down below. I know it sounds silly, but especially in a video like this, it does such a good job telling YouTube to suggest this video out to other NFL sickos just like you guys, so I really appreciate if you could take just a second to hit that down below. And of course, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss all 8 of my divisional draft grades videos. But let's go ahead and get started with the Denver Broncos, who kick off their draft grabbing cornerback slash defensive back extraordinaire Jahdae Barron out of Texas. And I've got a lot of circling thoughts on this one to kick off this draft grades video. I did settle on a B grade for this one. There's some stuff I really like about this pick. There's some questions I have about this pick in terms of overall value and maybe some other players they could have gone with. So I'll start on the negative and end on a positive note with this pick. So personally, I found myself on an island in this draft community in terms of not being as big of a fan as Jahdae Barron as so many people were. And the reason for that was I didn't like his outside cornerback tape nearly as much as I had hoped to based on the way people talked about him. I thought he was a much stiffer athlete out in space, slower feet. I thought he got really grabby at the top of wide receivers' routes. I could definitely see why for the first, 3-4 years of his time at Texas, he was a 5-year player at Texas. You could see why he spent a lot of time as a safety and a slot corner. I just didn't think he physically was natural on the outside, and I ultimately projected him as a true slot corner at the next level. I know he played outside corner at Texas. I have some pretty serious questions on if he's going to be able to do that at a starting caliber level consistently in the league. And because the league has continued to tell us that slot corner just isn't a super highly valued position, we often see the best slot corner in the draft go in the second round. Last year we saw that with, for example, Mike Sainristil. And for example, Jordan Lewis, who was a free agent this year. Most off seasons there are good slot corners that hit the market. Jordan Lewis became the highest paid true slot corner in the league at about $11 million a year. And if you're taking a top 20 pick on a guy that at least I project as a slot player for them, you're not maximizing on the value you can get from a wide receiver or an edge rusher or an offensive lineman in that you get 5 years of cheap control. Jahdae Barron immediately becomes a market competitive slot corner in terms of what you've got to pay him there. So that's obviously a bit of a ding on this pick, and because I did have Barron as a second round guy, I'm going to sit here and say there were a lot of guys I think would have been more valuable picks for this team. I look at like a Matthew Golden, for example. I really thought Denver was going to go playmaker with this 20th pick, man, with Bo Nix looking good, the defense being great last year. I was really excited to see them grab either a really nice wide receiver or Omarion Hampton, who the Chargers take a few picks later. I think those would have been awesome picks for Denver. Both guys were top 20 players in this draft, in my opinion. You obviously have this 20th pick, so the value would have lined up much better there. Now, I will say, I do love this fit for Jahdae Barron, and there's some things that actually made me move this from a C-graded pick based on everything we've talked about so far to actually more of a B-graded pick based on the fit and the landing spot here. In addition to something that I will admit I may have been short-sighted in terms of this specific draft class, something that definitely felt playing out live over the course of draft weekend. This was an absurdly thin slot cornerback draft, and Jahdae Barron is undoubtedly the best slot corner in this draft. Probably the only one you feel good about as a day one starter, and that was something unique this year. Normally there are a lot of guys sitting out there that you feel good about being slot corners at the next level. This year, I don't think those guys existed for one reason or another. So there's a little bit of value earned back there. We saw teams like the Texans and the Niners kind of reach, I think, for slot corners in the third round to make sure they can get their guys. I think you earn a little bit of value back relative to this draft to kind of play the board as it is. And then I also just love how Jahdae Barron's going to play inside this defense as that slot corner. They have Jaquan McMillan as their slot corner right now. I think Barron gives you comparable coverage ability, but infinitely better run defense. That is something that I loved about Jahdae Barron, and another reason I projected him into the slot was he is tough, he takes on blocks, he's willing to fill against the run. So you're going to be able to live in nickel much more and feel even more comfortable about your run defense, about someone that's there to clean up those bounce up lanes and bounce out lanes rather, and throw his head into the mud and get backs down to the ground inside the trenches. Like, I love how he's going to fit in the slot. And then because he has played everywhere in a comparable system, I would say, to what Texas ran last year, if Riley Moss, who's had a hard time staying healthy on the outside, if he goes down, I do think Barron can at least hold up on the outside as a nice kind of backup to play on the outside. I, again, don't think that's where you want him for the long haul. I think he will take his losses out there. But even as a safety, man, Talanoa Hufanga has had a very hard time staying healthy throughout his time in San Francisco. If he goes down or if something happens to Brandon Jones, man, I think Jahdae Barron could be an awesome safety. And if that happens, by the way, I wouldn't be surprised if he just stays there for the long haul. This was something I've talked about with him. Like, if you could tell me that he was just a safety prospect, my grade probably would have been higher. But as we know, that just doesn't always happen that way. So it'll be something to see play out. Ultimately, I landed on a B. I think it's a solid start to the Broncos draft. I'm not going to sit here and say it's a slam dunk pick or that there aren't other players I would have rather seen them take if I were a Broncos fan. But I do think he's going to play really well within this defense. So we're going to go B there, but unfortunately with this next pick, RJ Harvey at the end of the second round, I can't quite endorse this one. Now, they did trade down, they recouped some value, but this was just, man, not one I can really endorse based on how I saw RJ Harvey, sixth-year senior coming out of UCF at 5'8", 206 pounds. I just don't see a heavy impact back in the league personally. To be the fifth back drafted in this insane class, major reach, in my opinion. Not to say he's going to be a bad player. He's got good vision in between the tackles. He can make you miss in a phone booth. He's got decent contact balance. He's got that kind of low-to-the-earth build. But he does get incredibly bouncy with his vision as well. His sort of running back decision-making, if you will, is very questionable. When he does hit the hole inside, he can anticipate blocks and kind of have the agility and kind of navigate through the second level really well. But you're gonna get a lot of runs where Sean Payton's pulling his hair out, in my opinion, saying like, dude, we had a perfectly blocked run. Why did you try to bounce that outside and outrun a linebacker to the perimeter? Like, he's gonna have to learn that he can't do that in the NFL like he did at UCF. I also think like the 4.4 that he ran, he's got speed, but I don't think he consistently plays up to 4.4 speed. I don't see this as like some crazy explosive kind of scat back or like speed threat, like Jahmyr Gibbs type speed threat or anything near that level based on the tape. But, he certainly got caught from behind and didn't run up to that speed consistently. I think he's a bit of a short strider, and that shows on the football field. I think that 40 time probably elevated his draft stock. He also fumbled 5 times over the last 2 years. That's another thing he's got to clean up. And he also wasn't like hyper dynamic as a receiving threat. He was okay. He got his targets. He got about 20 catches every year, about 220 yards. Had a couple drops each year. Not a good pass protector. So I saw him as kind of a ideal RB, like backup running back, who can do a little bit of everything. But to draft him in the second round and kind of, that's heavy draft capital for a running back by today's standards. And to take him over guys like a Cam Scatabo, for example, or even a Byshell Tootin, who I think if you really want that sort of like Darren Sproles idea with this super fast back out of the backfield, might have been a better call there. I I just think it was a reach, man, and we'll see. Obviously, Sean Payton's done some good stuff with backs in the past, but I would bet against this one based on how I saw Harvey, and I obviously would love to be wrong. I'm just here to tell you how I saw these players, and that's where I stand on it. But then they do take Pat Bryant in the 3rd round. These next 2 picks with Pat Bryant and Savion Jones, it's like I see how they fit, but they were both like right at the very cusp of how early I would have considered these guys. So like I don't think they're crazy values or A-graded picks or anything like that, but I do like these picks and see how they fit in with the Broncos. You know, Pat Bryant was someone at this point, I'm proud to say that I had him in my original top 15 wide receiver rankings. Didn't see him getting that much love, but just incredibly strong, catches everything. The thing I love about Pat Bryant is that he kind of has that A.J. Brown trait where when the ball's in the air or even when he's running his routes, and DBs, especially in the NFL, they get physical, they get grabby, they commit legal defensive pass interference, if you will. And Pat Bryant, just like an A.J. Brown, is just so strong through his core and his arms and his legs. I think he plays stronger than the 208 pounds or whatever he measured in at. That surprised me. I mean, he looks and plays like he's 220. But the contact just doesn't faze him. And he's a super reliable contested catch receiver, doesn't drop the ball. I think he's a really nice, like, perimeter starting potential wide receiver. Not going to be a dynamic guy, but a really nice player to have if he can become the 4th or 5th most targeted player in your offense, but he's a trust throw guy if the quarterback gets in a pinch and needs someone to go make a play for you, and he's going to block his absolute ass off. And he's tough after the catch as well with that play strength. So I like the way he fits in here. You got a couple vertical threats. You got Evan Ingram's your slot wide receiver. I've said I refuse to call Evan Ingram a tight end with how I envision he's going to get used here. You've got Courtland Sutton as your true X. I think Pat Bryant's going to be a part of this rotation and has a chance to be worth this pick. But it was even then a little bit early, but a good pick nonetheless. And then they take Savion Jones at the very end of the 3rd round, where I had a 4th to a 5th round grade on him. So again, just like a little bit early. I do think there were better defensive linemen on the board still, but I do see Savion Jones, how they see him as a sort of developmental backup to John Franklin Myers in that role within this defense as that hybrid end type. That's who Savion Jones is. He's a heavy-handed, 280-pound defensive end. He does have a nice cross chop, so there's a little bit of like finesse to his game that shows you, you know, he's willing to, you know, go beyond just being a power player. I like that. He's a good athlete. So, you know, they're going to have to coach him up and get him in the right developmental mold there. But it's a good landing spot for him nonetheless. So I thought that pick was pretty good. Then you go to day 3. Nothing really stood out to me. You know, Q Robinson, this was a little bit rich for a guy that played 300 snaps in 5 years of college football. As good as he looked in those 300 snaps at Alabama in his 5th season, that's still a massive red flag for me. Like, that's pretty wild. But yeah, he's athletic. He's got bend. He's got some pass rush moves. At the end of the 4th round, I'm not going to slam them for it to get another edge rusher in that group. A lot of those guys had gone at this point, and really the one guy that stood out there would have been Braden Swinson, but it sounds like he had some off-field questions, so I'm not going to really criticize them for that. But a solid pick nonetheless by day 3 standards. Then they take the punter at the end of the end of the 6th round, fine with me. And then a fun pick, Caleb Lohner, basketball background type, tested really well. You know, this is the coach that made it work with Jimmy Graham. And at the end of the 7th round, why not get him in and see what he can do in a tight end room that's going to have some opportunities. So I thought that was a good, you know, kind of fun pick. And then nobody in the undrafted free agent department stood out to me. I landed on a C+ grade for the Denver Broncos. Certainly not my favorite draft. I think they got some contributors for sure, right? They like Jahdae Barron, for as harsh as I was on him as a 2nd round grade, his floor as a starting slot corner in the league is exceptionally high. So I think you landed that. We'll see where Harvey ends up. That's going to be a big decider on if this C+ grade is true or not on the whole draft. But I think you got a potential starter on the outside in Pat Bryant. And then, to be honest, I would probably bet against the rest of these guys working out, but Savion Jones was worth the dart throw at the end of the 3rd. So yeah, this is going to be one of my lower graded drafts. I think, as we're about to see with the rest of this division, unfortunately, Denver lost a little bit of ground on this division because everybody else had a phenomenal draft. Spoiler alert here. But let's start with the Kansas City Chiefs, who begin their draft with the 32nd pick in the first round, taking one of my favorite players in this entire draft, Josh Simmons, tackle out of Ohio State. In my opinion, before the injury, or if you could remove the injury from the equation here, this would have been the 4th overall pick in the draft to the New England Patriots as the best left tackle in this draft. Remarkable athlete, remarkable technique. I think he improved his play strength into his final year. He's a good run blocker, certainly good enough for the Chiefs here. The key issue here is that patellar tendon injury, which has been a non-starter for so many athletes trying to make it in the NFL. But all reports are recovery's going well, and he might even be ready for the start of the season. But how he can recover and stay healthy from that injury is for the most part gonna like define this draft, though I think they got some other exciting picks in here. But this wasn't some certified steal A+ graded pick for me because it was expected that he was gonna be here around this range. But I will say, I was kind of tweeting a few weeks ago, like, the league can't afford to let the Chiefs get Josh Simmons. And if he can be healthy, man, like, for the Chiefs to get someone that, you know, if the injury can recover, would have been a top 5 pick in this draft, like, that's obviously tremendous for a team that's never going to be picking that high where all of the franchise tackles go off the board. So if you're the Chiefs, especially, and you're in this position, right, like, if this was some team that had acquired a playoff team's pick or something that normally is going to have a chance at picking a tackle inside the top 10, you'd probably pass on the injury concerns. But for the Chiefs, like, they never get a chance to draft a player of this caliber. He's there because of the injury, so it's a risk. But if he's healthy, man, this is going to be one of the best picks of this entire draft. He's awesome. I see a lot of David Bakhtiari in his game. So that's good news for Patrick Mahomes. But then at the end of the second round, such a logical, easy pick to break down here. They take Omar Norman-Lott out of Tennessee. He is precisely your Tershawn Wharton replacement, a lighter, pass-rushing-oriented defensive tackle. Omar Norman-Lott has a chance to be better than Wharton is. I think he's a better athlete. He's got really good power. He can uncoil and unload on an offensive lineman. He's shown some quick hitting pass rush moves. He's just unique because he's like really has hardly played. He played like 350 something snaps last year as Tennessee rotated these guys like crazy. And because of that, he just, you know, he's kind of a ground up rebuild in terms of asking him to defend the run at all. So I had a 3rd round grade on Omar Norman-Lott. He ends up essentially going there with the 31st pick in the 2nd round. The only reason this is a B graded pick instead of an A is I would have taken Darius Alexander. He goes a couple picks later. I just thought he was a better overall prospect that can be more of a 3-down player for you. But again, a good pick. I see how he fits here and absolutely fills that Tershawn Wharton role there. Then a few picks later, they take Ashton Gelati, the edge out of Louisville. A little bit earlier than I thought he would go, but he definitely fills what they look for in their edge rushers. He is one of the more filled out, length, strength-based profiles in this draft. Kind of their type. I don't know that he's going to cement himself as a full-time starter or anything like that, though right now they have Mike Dana as a full-time starter for them. I think he could be better than Mike Dana, but Mike Dana might be the worst starting edge rusher in the league right now, potentially, like true starter that's getting like 700-something snaps. So I think he'll at least be a part of that rotation there with Dana, and then he does allow you to not have to pay Mike Dana. They extended him last offseason, but they can cut him after this year and save $9 million on the cap. So something to keep an eye on there is that being kind of a draft strategy here. I think if you're in the Chiefs' shoes, to use that as a 3rd round pick is very solid. I think there are probably better players available, but definitely see how he fits with that defense. Then they take Noel Williams out of California. Definitely their type, that kind of corner with size that can play physical, really good run defender, good zone IQ. I didn't love his man-to-man stuff, so I'm not going to sell you on him like being this great pick. I had him as a 4th round graded guy, so they take him at the end of the 3rd. I think it's fine. It's a good, solid pick. He's going to have a chance to be one of these mid-round defensive backs that turns into a contributor in this defense. Just next in line with like 8 of these guys. They have a great eye for these types of corners in this range, so certainly wouldn't be a surprise if he ends up in the kind of Jalen Watson, Joshua Williams, Shamari Connor breadth of, mid-round defensive backs that they've taken. He's very consistent with that profile. But then day 3 was freaking awesome for the Chiefs, man. They get Jalen Royals, who I think was a better overall player than those last 2 guys we talked about, so they make up some value there. The second they took him, it hit me. The pro comp on Jalen Royals is Rashee Rice. Someone that in college was basically just stuck on the outside for the most part, ran up and down the sideline, won some tough catches, but doesn't necessarily project in that skill set. Now they're a little bit different. Rashee Rice didn't really have the speed to stack corners on the outside. Royals doesn't really have the size to compete with bigger corners on the outside at the next level. But both guys kind of in that sort of Juju Smith-Schuster concept of receivers that, man, if you can get them on crossing routes, bubble screens, dig routes, like slants, work them on in-breaking routes over the middle of the field where they are awesome after the catch, absolutely. And then they do have a little bit of that background to play outside and have some of that flexibility on top of it. Just too good a value to pass up at this point. There's not going to be a huge opportunity for him for the foreseeable future, but there might be, because Rashee Rice is expected to be suspended early this year. We still need to hear about that, but I think Royals can literally just play the Rashee Rice role immediately. And then they've got Worthy, they've got Hollywood Brown. So like, it does get a little bit messy once Rice comes back, but I mean, you got a long window here with Royals on that 4-year rookie contract. I think he could eventually settle in as a starter, whether it's their true slot guy or, they find a useful role as a Z where he can coexist, maybe where you have 2 of those guys that are kind of like Rashee Rice, but both a little bit different, and then maybe Worthy turns into more your true deep threat. I just think it's a phenomenal fit. Very consistent with some of these guys like Rice and Juju that they've had success with in recent years. Then they take Jeffrey Bassa out of Oregon. He got a lot of love in the pre-draft process by linebacker standards. I didn't see it. I saw someone that converted from safety that's still, 3 years after playing linebacker now. He played his first year at Oregon as a safety, and then the last 3 at linebacker. Still kind of looks like a safety. Like, I don't think he's filled out that frame all that well. Still room to do that. He's not that fast for one of these undersized linebackers. And for a converted safety, man, I wanted to see so much more consistency from his zone IQ and ability to rally around the ball as a coverage defender. I saw him as a true undersized, developmental, quote-unquote traits-based linebacker, but I don't think the traits are all that good. So someone that'll play special teams, not make an impact on your defense right away, in my opinion. But he does have some instincts against the run. If he can fill out, maybe they could find something there. But this was not a player that really got me all that excited. I saw him ranked as a top 5, top 6 linebacker by most people, and I did not see him that way. So we'll see. Kind of an average, standard day 3 pick, if you will. But then, man, Brashard Smith in the 7th round. Are you kidding me? This is one of the most exciting, like potentially impactful day 3 picks that we saw. Brashard Smith is the perfect fit for the Kansas City Chiefs. A super electric kind of human joystick type of back. Some of the best elusiveness, shiftiness in this draft with the spins and the jukes and all of that fun stuff. A guy that was a wide receiver, literally, and then moved to running back. He's got that Tyrone Tracy arc. Not the same player, but same idea where it's a back that, after 1 year of playing the position, his vision is very, very spotty. He bounced a lot of runs outside. He was late to see a lot of holes. So if he never develops that aspect of the game, like, he's going to be more of a receiving scat back, and that's what he can be right away. But when he did pick the right hole, he actually had like really good anticipatory vision to like see second level defenders coming and make those second level defenders miss. There were times where he actually kind of let blocks set up and kind of press the hole. So like the flashes of it are there. And again, it's just a one-year player there. So that's awesome. And then unlike Tyrone Tracy, you know, Tracy showed in his rookie year and on his tape, like for being a former wide receiver turned running back, he wasn't amazing at the wide receiver stuff. Brashard Smith was. Like, he made tough back shoulder catches. They would flex him out from the slot and run slot fades and double moves. He can run wheel routes. Like, he has awesome potential as a wide receiving back. He is every bit what Jerick McKinnon was for this team. And remember, like, they would basically for a couple years there just stash Jerick McKinnon because the dude would break after 30 touches within a season. But they would just kind of stash him all year and then break him out as like a secret weapon in the playoffs. This gives you a chance to get that role consistently because you're not going to get those durability concerns. I love the fit. And for a spread style offense that runs out of shotgun and spreads out the defense, that I think could be a role where Brashard Smith could actually come along and be a good running back if the vision stuff can tick up. So I think this was a phenomenal pick. Absolutely someone to target in your dynasty drafts, which a quick plug, I did just drop my full dynasty rookie rankings for you guys with your rookie drafts. It's available on Patreon if you're in the superstar tier, if you want to subscribe, or you can purchase those individually for $10 if you are interested. But beyond that, they grab a couple of interesting undrafted free agents. Elijah Badger is a really nice wide receiver. I don't know that he's ever going to be a starter in the league, but he screams useful wide receiver for a lot of kind of DeMarcus Robinson to his game. He's got average size. He's got nice feet. He's got pretty good speed. Just kind of I'll just say a jack of all trades, and I don't want to throw the master of none on there because I think he does do some stuff pretty well. Wouldn't be a huge surprise if he became a starter in the league, but I think he can come in and make the team and fill out this wide receiver depth really well. They did lose, what was it, Justin Watson, who always felt like he found a way to get on the field at some point and make some catches. I could see him kind of being that for this Chiefs team where he hangs around for a few years and being a team that plays in the spotlight, a guy that, you know, kind of makes a little bit of a name for himself. And then, man, Issa Pohl as an undrafted free agent pickup, absolutely, dude. This dude, I got to see him up close and personal at the Shrine Bowl, absolutely looks the part. Played well in Washington State's system as a pass protector. He's relatively new to football. I don't understand why he didn't get drafted and so many of these other developmental tackles did. So just to get another guy in that building, I mean, not only do you need the franchise tackle like Josh Simmons when they took him in the first, but honestly, it'd be nice if like they could find two guys that could be long-term options for them at tackle. And I think Pohle at least has a punter's chance at it. It's obviously not likely, but an undrafted free agent worth noting in case it happens. So I went with an A- on the Kansas City Chiefs draft. And Brett Veach reminded us yet again that the Chiefs are really, really freaking good at this. And obviously, if Josh Simmons proves to be healthy, this is like an A+ draft. And if those injury concerns are really bad and he's not able to go, this is not going to be an A- draft. You're going to be more in the B or C range with this. But even then, they stole some guys down the board that I think are going to make an impact after Josh Simmons. But let's go to the Las Vegas Raiders. They basically had two whole drafts worth talking about here with a whopping 11 picks. I think this was the most picks any team made this weekend, which Pete Carroll loves this style of drafting, but love this draft, man. You start with Ashton Ginty out the gate. The Raiders are really building this identity where like they just want to make sure that it sucks to play you. And that starts with signing Pete Carroll. It started with getting Brock Bowers, obviously, last year. But, you know, the letter that Ginty wrote to the league couldn't be any better to summarize who he is as a player. He wrote, in a league where it's all about tackling, I'm the guy you can't tackle. Thank you for hearing me, Ashton Ginty. And that was his whole letter to the league. And the Raiders are like, yep, you're right. We're taking you with the 6th pick. And definitely think he's the quality of running back prospect worthy of taking inside the top 10 here. Love what he just does for the identity of this team. This was the expected pick, but it was the right pick. Just, you know, the official poster boy for the groundwork that you've already set for who you want to be as a football team. But then I love that they continued to build upon that identity, getting Jack Bech at the end of the second round. And this is right around the area I thought he would go. End of second, early 3. They get him with the 26th pick. But I actually gave this an A+ grade because they were able to move down, get, in my opinion, the perfect player for them, and get an extra third-round pick on top of that. Just tremendous execution, draft strategy-wise. But Jack Bech is like the wide receiver in this draft that sucks to tackle. Maybe not the most, you know, elusive guy in terms of the most missed tackles forced after the catch or anything, but he was up there on a catch-by-catch basis. But he turns into an asshole after the catch. He trucks you, he stiff arms you. He's 220 pounds, he's got a ton of play strength. But despite being that size, he actually has like really quick feet. So he's able to kind of juke you a little bit, but even within the routes, especially, like he can actually get open, snap off dig routes at the top of his break, corner routes, out routes, that kind of stuff. Like he's a legitimate route runner. Now he's not that fast. I think he's going to spend a ton of time in the slot. I think they're going to run a lot of condensed formations. You know, my pro comp on Jack Bech was something like Jawan Jennings for the Niners. And you talk about how him and George Kittle kind of coexist within that Niners offense as guys that are awesome blockers, super tough after the catch, you know, difficult players to cover because of their unique athletic traits. I think you've got comparable, you know, weapons here with the Raiders, frankly. I don't think it's crazy to compare Bowers to Kittle. I don't think it's crazy to compare Bech to Jawan Jennings. I don't think it's crazy to compare Ashton Ginty to Christian McCaffrey, right? So like the Raiders are going for this rack bros mentality, like we saw with the Niners in 2022. And I just love that identity for them. And I think it really raises the floor of what this offense could be. Then they start to take a look at this defense. They go Darian Porter at the top of the third round there with the 4th pick in the 3rd round. I think that's a good value, man. This is a round where I had him going late 2, early 3. But man, talk about Pete Carroll getting a 6'3" athletic corner. We've seen this story before. Not just Richard Sherman, but Tariq Woolen. Like that's kind of the Porter comp. I ended up going with Zion McCollum as my final pro comp though, because Porter, even more than like a Tariq Woolen, Porter actually has like fluid hips and quick athletic movements to really like run man coverage and get in a guy's hip pocket. I felt the same about Decamarion Richardson, who went like 4th round last year. If both those guys could hit, you quite possibly might have the most athletic cornerback duo in the NFL. They already have Eric Stokes on the outside, who's got a lot of speed. Like, I don't hate this cornerback room as much as I think a lot of people do. Obviously, Raiders fans would get upset if you don't mention the breakout as well of Jacorian Bennett, who's got a ton of speed himself. So you have a super athletic cornerback room behind a defensive line that you're hoping is going to be obviously tremendously improved with those guys getting back healthy. So love dropping him into the defense. That was definitely the biggest need outside of linebacker, but this linebacker class was tough. So I can't fault them for not going linebacker there. Overall, Porter comes with risk. He played at Iowa State for 6 years, just the last 3 of which he was actually a corner. He started at wide receiver, and he was even like not even a full-time starter this last year at Iowa State. But when he was out there, the tape was lockdown, and obviously we just raved about the traits. So he's not guaranteed to hit in the 3rd round, but I gave that pick an A. I really like the landing spot. And then I love them kind of investing in the offensive line at the end of the 3rd round. They take Caleb Rogers a little earlier than I thought he would go. This was another guy that was at the very peak of my day 3 watch list. I got up early Saturday morning to get to some of these guys, and Caleb Rogers just comes off the board here with one of those last picks in the 3rd round. But I know he had some people that liked him. He tested well. He played like every position other than center at Texas Tech. If all he is at the end of the 3rd round here is a really nice kind of 6th man of the year as a swing man for you, that will play, but I do think he has the traits to turn into a starter. And then to pair that with Charles Grant, you know, Caleb Rogers probably more of an interior player with his arm length. Charles Grant is definitely a developmental tackle prospect, and I love that because it gives you another dart throw at right tackle if DJ Glaze doesn't prove to be what you want him to be this year. I really hope they can work things out with Colton Miller, but there's been some talk about a contract situation there that's a little bit rocky at the moment. But the value is tremendous. I definitely thought he would go right around where Bastion Porter went. Just hyper-productive, like really tradesy player out of William & Mary. I think that became a very big value with essentially a 4th-round pick there. So I just love the guys they got for their offense and the pieces that they kind of filled in. And then, dude, I love this next pick as well, securing Dante Thornton at the top of the 4th round. I had a 3rd to a 4th round grade on Thornton. And, you know, for a guy that fast at that size that, you know, had pretty solid hands in the very few targets he got in that random-ass Tennessee offense that doesn't really apply to the NFL because they're just taking advantage of the wide hashes. They run these stack formations, and they just tell a guy with 4.3 speed to just run into space. But, I mean, there's nothing about his tape that says he can't be a vertical threat in the NFL. It's just about volume and translating from that weird offense. But this is definitely the range where I thought the risk was worth the reward, especially when you talk about, you know, okay, now you've built all these, like, this concentration of short to intermediate dominators with all these guys we've already talked about. You've got 4 of them, really, with the young kids you've invested in, and then Jacoby Myers is still here. Now, if you have someone that can take the top off the defense and take an extra defender out of the box, like, that could just completely change the math for this, the construction of this entire offense. So I think getting that piece there makes a ton of sense. That's exactly the piece I would have taken for them for that role. He's far from a guarantee to hit, right? But if he does, again, I will go back to that term, changing the math of this offense, and that could really lift the ceiling of this entire operation here. So I love that pick. And then I do think they reached on Tonka Hemingway. I just didn't see it with him. Really quick athlete, but hyper undersized. Can't really play against the run, and I don't think he's a good enough pass rusher to be like a situational pass rusher. Adam is more of a like end of the draft dart throw on athletic traits on the D line. I do see how he fits their hybrid, you know, front as a 4i. But that certainly wasn't my favorite pick. I think you could have gone in a lot of different directions with still a pretty nice pick at the end of the 4th round. But then JJ Pegues, another dart throw on an athletic interior defensive lineman that's still trying to figure things out. But I also am very excited to see if they might be willing to play him as a fullback. He came into Ole Miss as a tight end. He played Wildcat quarterback for them, so he has experience touching the football. And I think he could be very much one of the best fullbacks in the NFL. And you could probably play him as a rotational D lineman and a fullback for you. And, like, dude, you put him in the mix there with all of these other, like, 12 personnel weapons that you have, or at least condensed formation weapons that you have. Could be a lot of fun. So I think that's a great pick. Then they take Tommy Mellott out of Montana State. Played quarterback for them, but tested remarkably well. I didn't obviously watch him, not just as a quarterback, but as a wide receiver, because I don't think he's played any wide receiver yet, but he's going the Julian Edelman wide receiver turn or quarterback turned wide receiver route. So why not at the end of the 6th round, take a dart throw on those traits for a guy that's going to work hard to try to make it happen coming out of Montana State. And then they take Cam Miller out of North Dakota State. I like how he fits. You know, I wasn't overly impressed by Cam Miller, but I like how he fits as a, you know, backup point guard type in the infrastructure that you've built here. He doesn't have a big arm, but ran North Dakota State's offense well. You can do some stuff with him as a design QB runner as well. So if Geno goes down, I think Cam Miller could potentially run the show, and you know, keep the boat from sinking, if you will. And then Cody Lindenberg out of Minnesota is their 7th round pick. Good value there. I had a 5th to a 6th round grade on him. Man, with how that linebacker room is constructed, he might start or at least compete for a starting opportunity. They've got Devin White, Landon Roberts, Tommy Eichenberg, who I liked last year, but Lindenberg is in that mix. You know, he missed a lot of time at Minnesota, but clearly understands his read keys. I think he's got nice feet. He's not super fast, but he was definitely draftable, and I think, if nothing else, is good depth for you there in the 7th round. No undrafted pickup stood out to me on the Raiders, but I am giving this draft an A. Love what they did, and I'm just excited to watch this football team. I think the Raiders are going to be one of the most fun teams in the league to watch, at least offensively. And if they don't lead the league in missed tackles forced, or at least aren't second behind the Niners, I would be a little bit surprised, because these guys, that's going to be their identity. But let's finish things up with the Los Angeles Chargers draft. They begin by taking Omarion Hampton with the 22nd pick. This is a B grade for me for the sole reason that I did really like the Najee Harris signing, and I do look at the Chargers seeing like, okay, I think you need D-line. I think you need some receivers. I think the outside cornerback group is fine, but could have been looked at. Like, I think there were other positions that I certainly would have preferred the Chargers went with, but I do think Hampton was the best player available for them other than Matthew Golden. Again, like, I think that would have been an A pick for me for the Chargers. They obviously went with some other wide receivers later, but that's just my thoughts on it. Like, I think Hampton is awesome. You don't really need me to explain how great of a fit he is with a Chargers team that wants to run the ball. Coming in, he's going to split carries with Najee Harris. They now don't need to give Najee Harris an extension. You've got Omarion Hampton with 5 years of cheap control. So it's more of a play for the 2026 Chargers and beyond. Like, he will contribute to this team, but he's not going to be quite as impactful of a pick this year as some other guys would have been. But again, it's a good pick. Hampton's an awesome, awesome running back. He can do any sort of run scheme. He's a great pass protector. He can catch balls out of the backfield. I love Omarion Hampton. So even if I wish the Chargers went in a different direction positionally, I can't slam them for getting this player, especially when they adjust well on day 2. The 23rd pick in the 2nd round, they take Trey Harris, right around where I thought he would go. A great dart throw for the Chargers that I think have spent a couple years looking for this type of piece, and hopefully Trey Harris can be the one that hits for him, right? Like, they were in a lot of rumors to be interested in DK Metcalf. That never surfaced, but they draft Quentin Johnston. He hasn't turned into that field stretching kind of half X, half Z receiver in that mold. Trey Harris is going to give them a chance at that. He does get open deep. He ran like 4.54, so he doesn't have like insane speed, but he plays faster in pads, I think, relative to a lot of corners, if that makes sense. He carries his pads well. He's got long strides. He does accelerate down the field and does get open vertically. And showed some really impressive catches, had insane production before the injury slowed him down in his final year. There's just some like random moments with him that leave a little bit to be desired, kind of Quentin Johnston-esque in that way, if I'm going to be honest, where it's like, oh, why didn't you work back to the quarterback on that one? Or you could have boxed out the defender a little bit better. Or why did you jump for the ball there on that crossing route and allow the defender that was trailing you to come back into the play and tackle you? Like, there's just some like football awareness moments with him that were shades of some Ole Miss receivers like Jonathan Mingo, where it's like everything's technically there, but you're just not everything I want you to be. So like, that's why he ends up going at the end of the 2nd round for a guy that has a really valuable skill set and did have some really big moments. But I love the landing spot, getting to be with Justin Herbert, who I think has a good chance of unlocking him here. And if you weren't going to go wide receiver in the 1st round, I think this is who I would have taken for them with that 23rd pick. And then again, if you're not going to go D-line in the 1st round, when a lot of those defensive tackles had gone, you would have had to, reach a little bit more for someone like Tyleik Williams or Darius Alexander or something like that. If you were to go that route in the 1st round, I think playing the board and dipping into the depth of this interior D-line class and getting Jamari Caldwell, in the back half of the 3rd round is an awesome pick. I love Jamari Caldwell. He has rare traits in the sense that he's 330 pounds and carries it well. He flies off the ball for such a big guy. He can uncoil and bull rush you and knock you back in a way that very few 330-pound nose tackle types can really get out of their stance like Jamari Caldwell. So he's inconsistent with it. That trait is just in flashes. Saw some of it on tape, saw some of it at the Senior Bowl, certainly. If you can tap into that, that's going to amplify your whole pass rush because he can be an instant pocket condenser and almost like a nuclear missile that you can line up and just detonate the pass protection. So that's a rare trait that he has. And then he has a lot of potential to get better and more consistent kind of anchoring and taking on double teams as a run defender. That's ultimately why he goes in the 3rd round here, is he would let his pads get high. He tried to play a little bit more like that athletic 3-tech than a nose tackle at times. He was kind of like just a turned down version of Kenneth Grant in this draft in many ways. But likewise, he actually can win with some finesse rush moves too and cross guys' faces with quicker feet than you'd expect. So he's not a guarantee to hit, but I think his upside is well worth it where they took him in the 3rd round. And then you go to day 3. Love the Kyle Kennard pick at the end of the 4th round. Again, just really nice value, man. Like, I think Kyle Kennard projects easily as a really nice number 3 edge. I don't think he's going to be a dominant pass rusher with his tools at the next level, but I think he can be a plus run defender, someone that can help you keep Khalil Mack a little bit fresher for those later downs. Khalil Mack can still defend the run, but you might not want him to. You might not want to ask him to do that 30 times a game. So Kyle Kennard can come in and help. Khalil Mack at his age stay a little bit fresh, stay healthy, and be a nice part of that rotation as a 4th round guy. And then I loved kind of double dipping on vertical threats here. You take Keandre Lambert-Smith, whose high-end pro comp for me was Darius Slayton, almost identical profile, vertical threat, not a huge guy, but tall, out of the SEC, not the best hands, but can clearly track the deep ball and doesn't have horrible hands. I think he's just a really nice dart throw for where they got him there. It's around the range I had him going. And between him and Trey Harris, I think you have a very good chance of walking out with more of a field-stretching wide receiver to open things up for this awesome run game. And you obviously have a quarterback that can get it out there to him, which is huge. Then Oronde Gadsden in the 5th round. Love this pick, man. I don't think it's like a steal or anything crazy value or like, he should have gotten earlier necessarily. I had a 5th round grade on him. But getting to come into Greg Roman's offense that has shown us that he knows how to use these kind of lighter tight ends in 12 personnel, love this fit. Think of those good games that Stone Smart had last year. I think Oronde Gadsden is a better version of that. And it's just a player that I really wanted to, if I was in the GM chair, I would have wanted to bet on this guy on day 3 of the draft. Son of a former NFLer, played wide receiver for the Jets, I believe. But 2 years of high-end production at Syracuse, one in 2022. Then he battled back from a Liz Frank injury that he suffered early in 2023, where he was off to a good start. And then he actually responds to that, bounces back in 2024, shows a ton of resiliency, in my opinion, puts up another 900-yard season on 73 catches, 60% contested catch win rate, dropped just 3 passes on 103 targets. Like, this dude catches everything. He's got tremendous ball skills. I think he flashes good routes. He's got straight line speed. Now, he's a stiffer guy. There's a reason he wasn't getting the buzz of like Mason Taylor and Colston Loveland, because those guys can really sink their hips and turn. Gadsden doesn't quite have that, but it doesn't mean he can't separate or run routes. And then the other thing is, like, I think he played probably at about 225, maybe 230 pounds in his last year at Syracuse, but he's bulked up. He's respecting the process. He understands if he's going to make it, he's got to get up to at least 240 pounds, and he did that for the Shrine Bowl. He weighed in at like 243 pounds, and I thought he stood out as maybe the best player in attendance at the Shrine Bowl that week. Could just be a reflection of how bad this linebacker class was, trying to cover him out there in Denton, but man, he was just running away from everybody, making tough catches, and he was moving. You could tell, like, he is a really nice athlete, and that was at 240 pounds. And then at his pro day, he runs a 4.6, like, at that size. Again, big fan of this player. Hadn't heard too many people hyping him up when I put him in my top 10 tight ends rankings, and I love the landing spot. My take on this, and we haven't done the NFC West yet, I think he's going to be a better NFL tight end than the 2 NFC West tight ends that went in the 2nd round, both Terrence Ferguson and Elijah Arroyo. Definitely a hot take. Not a guarantee to hit, but it's something I'll put myself out there on that one. But you get to the back end of their draft there. They grab a guard out of Pittsburgh in Branson Taylor. I didn't get to him, so hopefully they see something they like there. Just kind of a standard 6th round pick, in my opinion. Wasn't really on my radar. But then they take R.J. Mickens, the safety out of Clemson. I thought he was a solid safety prospect. To get him at the end of the 6th round, it had started to become a value. The thing on him that's interesting is, he played a lot at Clemson, but really for the first 2,000 snaps of his career, he began starting games in 2021. He just wasn't much of an impact player in terms of ball production, kind of a does his job type, doesn't blow a ton of coverages, but had abysmal ball production up until the last 5 games of his career, where 6 of his 14 career passes defended, again, out of 2,100 career snaps, almost 50% of his snaps came in the last 5% of his games. So it's did something click at the end there, where he started to play a little bit more aggressive and became more of an impact player for Clemson? Or was it just, he got lucky, and that's kind of the variability of safety play? Just something interesting to monitor that gives him a little bit of hidden upside in there. The other thing on him, though, is he tested really well, and that stunned me off the tape I watched on him. He had a 41.5-inch vertical jump, a 4.49 40. I don't know. Maybe he just really does have that kind of conservative play style, and he just doesn't get up to top speed very often. But got to find a way to kind of tap into the traits and some of the ball production he had late if he's ever going to be a starter. He's not the biggest guy to be this dominant run defender, in my opinion, but as a special teamer and solid depth that's played a lot of high-level football and isn't going to blow assignments for you, if nothing else, he's a really good pick there. And then there's a little bit of hidden upside in there, too, if something really was clicking. And then they take another guy I didn't get to there, almost Mr. Irrelevant there, Triquez Bridges out of Florida. Excellent tester. Why not take a shot on those types of traits late? And then one undrafted pickup that I liked, Raheem Sanders, big-bodied speed, straight-line speed threat out of South Carolina. I liked him quite a bit. And there's a lot of Gus Edwards to his game. I'll put it that way. Kind of one-trick pony. Block it up, let him run in a straight line and bowl through the defense. But that's obviously a good fit as a backup running back in here. I don't think Gus Edwards is back for the year. If not, he's obviously not if he is, he's obviously not a long-term solution there. So get him as an undrafted pickup. I like it. But I went with an A- grade for the LA Chargers. I think every pick made sense. They got value up and down the board. I don't think they really reached anywhere. I don't think any pick blew me away for this to compete with the other A-graded drafts either, but back-to-back years, I think the Chargers and this new Harbaugh, Ortiz-led regime are doing a great job just filling out this team, where the previous regime maybe was... I'm not criticizing this regime's ability to find star players, but the previous regime was yeah, we can find star players, but players 10 through 53... good luck out there. That is not the case with this team. They consistently find value and bring in effective football players for what they're investing in them, and I think this draft was another reflection of that. And that is going to do it. Definitely let me have it in the comments down below. Let me know your thoughts on my grades from this video. Ultimately, if I was critical of a player, I obviously hope I'm wrong. I'm just being honest about what I saw here heading into the draft. But as we head out, if you could, again, please take just a second to hit that like button. Make sure you subscribe so you can catch all of my draft grades videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you soon. Peace out.